Spiritual Christianity, Chapter 6 continued. We move now back to Tulk's commentaries. Point number 113. Clear and consistent are the above truths to everyone who can extricate his thoughts from the fallacies which are inherent in a merely natural condition of the mind. What more then can be required but to direct the attention to certain expressions, the meanings of which have been misunderstood, and to others which are still liable to misapprehensions, unless they be taken in connection with what the author says of the origin of time and space in the natural world, and of the universality of correspondences in the three kingdoms of nature. For all nature, he says, is a theatre which represents the Lord's kingdom. And his kingdom cometh not by observation, but is within man, even in the interior faculties of will and intellect. Point number 114. A system of so purely spiritual a kind, established as it is on the heavenly truths of reason, which do not admit of being mingled with the natural appearances of truth, without in a measure lose their coherency, has required the adoption of several terms, which, if not altogether new, are many of them applied in a novel sense. These terms, though evidently intended to have the force of substantives, seem by their grammatical structure to require that some word or words should be supplied in order to give completeness to their meanings. Among this class are to be found in such words as, I'm going to do my best to pronounce the Latin here, internum and externum, interior and exterior, celeste, spiritual, rational, conjugal, natural, sensual, material, and corporeum, and also celestia, spirituala, rationalia, naturalia, all of which of doubtful meaning until the right word be supplied which shall convey to the mind a definite sense. This the author has done in several instances, and by the explanations which he himself has given, he has enabled the student to supply for himself the only words which can complete the true sense of the remainder. It has already been shown that when the author used the word natural, he did not intend it to be understood in relation to the external nature, but to the natural mind, or to that state of the mind when it thinks in space and time, and not above them. And this, he adds, is to be considered in uniform meaning. And there's a sentence here in Latin which I am not going to attempt to pronounce. I'll add it in the comments. No words could have been chosen more clear and distinct and comprehensive, nor better fitted to prevent mistakes. Perverse indeed must be the mind that after such a definition by the author himself of his own meaning would venture to substitute another word which should convey another meaning, never intended by the author. But the intention of the author does not rest upon the definition of natural. It will be seen in the notes inserted at the beginning of the above extracts that he means by interior and exterior the interior and exterior faculties of the mind, and by the internum and externum the internal and external states of the mind. The former being that state which he calls the internal spiritual man or mind, the words man and mind being used synonymously, and the latter the external natural man or mind. On examining the different passages which such like terms occur, by the light of these and similar explanations, it will be found that they all of them relate to the state or condition of the mind in respect to the life of its will, and to the quality of its thought, and in their plural forms to the various states of the internal or the external faculties. Thus, rationale means a rational state of the mind, or what is equivalent, the rational man or mind. Material has no reference whatever to matter, but to a material condition of the mind when it is enslaved to the fallacies and the grosser delights of the sense. Conjugal is not an abstract principle, but a married condition of the mind, when, by its regeneration, the will and the intellect are united in a heavenly marriage, and so of the rest. Point number 115. It is by being pre-instructed in these meanings, so as to prevent any misapplication of them to such objects as the author never contemplated when he used them, that the above truth of the existence of spiritual space and time with all the objects of sensation in the sentient faculties of the mind become obvious, and consistent with those oft repeated declarations that there is neither space nor time in that world, and yet that the external or sensuous appearance of the two is in no respect different from what it is in nature. That the action of mind upon mind should produce in the sentient faculties the appearance of a change of place may well, as he says, seem strange to him, who knows nothing of life such as it is in that world, where there are neither spaces nor times, but states of life instead. Quote, "These states produce in the external faculties a completely living appearance of progressions and motion." End quote. This appearance, he adds, is as living and as real as is the appearance of life being in us and our own, when yet the truth is our life inflows from the Lord as the fount of life. So different is the reality of things in the spiritual world from what is supposed to constitute their reality in this, without in the least losing their sensuous objectivity, which is complete and perfect. All the objects in their three kingdoms are intuitively seen in conjunction with those relations of love and thought to which they owe their objective birth. They are objects of the mind, appearing, as they do with us, distinct from the mind, but really existing and interiorly perceived to exist in the sentient faculties of sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. Though they appear to be distinct from the mind, they are not, as the natural man regards them, separate from the mind, but are, as they are intuitively perceived to be effects of the affinities of love and thought, and the spiritual being perceptively knows their meaning. On the other hand, the natural man refers these objects of his senses, differing in no respect as objects from those which are obvious to the senses in the spiritual world, to material causes distinct from the mind, and while he so thinks, he can see no relation to them to any affinities of love and thought, and though he may be taught their meanings and admit them on authority, he will have little or no rational knowledge of them, and certainly no perception whatever of the spheres of goodness and of truth, or of evil and of falsehood, which are the causes of these sensuous manifestations. And yet they are so connected in themselves that they ought so to be considered, is evident from the whole tenor of the interior sense of the word, and of the reasons which are assigned for the signification of every event, as well as every commandment which in the literal sense contains. As an instance, take the spiritual meaning of an ox, an object which so frequently appears in the spiritual and the natural worlds. In unfolding the laws which were delivered to the Israelites by Moses, Swedenborg, speaking of that one which ordains that if a man's ox hurt the ox of a companion and it die, they shall sell the living ox and divide the money between them, he says that the killing of one ox by another signifies the destruction of a good affection by another affection which is opposed to it. But why should this be its signification? The reason is given, and a most remarkable reason it is, for it is given in reference to sensuous appearances in the spiritual world, and yet it is applied to the like objects in the natural world, just as if they were similarly constituted, or as if one reason would do for both, for that both had their origin from similar spheres of life. In the spiritual world, an affection for goodness of a natural kind, when it is exhibited in an animal form, appears as a gentle ox. And because this affection is its origin, it is therefore its signification. The affection is the cause, and the animal appearance is the effect. Now all of this is quite clear as respects the objects which appear in heaven, There the various relations of angelic love and thought, when they descend into the sentient faculties of the mind, are exhibited in such forms and types, and coinciding with them as their effects, they are said to signify them or to be their representative signs. But what kind of reason would it be for the ox, which the natural man beholds, signifying some good affection of a natural kind, supposing that the gentle animal in nature be not an effect of such a good affection? Why, clearly none at all. Quote, "He who knows not how representatives and correspondencies are constituted will doubtless wonder how an ox, being a beast, can signify a man's affection for goodness." End quote. And unless it be an effect in the sentient faculties of the natural man, as it is an effect in the same faculties of the spiritual man, he will, notwithstanding the explication, wonder still. But if it really be, notwithstanding the conclusions to which the natural man, thinking in space and time, arrives, an effect of spiritual causes, or the result in the sentient faculties of spheres of a spiritual kind, and which exist as a sensuous object whenever those spheres exist, and which ceases to exist as a sensuous object when its spiritual causes are no longer present to the mind, then the reason becomes as plain in reference to the one world as it is in reference to the other. In the spiritual world, this creation of sensuous objects by the medium of spheres is a truth most fully admitted and known. They require not, in that state of perceptive life, to be told that such and such animals, vegetables, and minerals are the effects of a confluence in spiritual spheres, having particular qualities and uses. They perceive at once the very causes themselves in the representative effects. If, however, the natural world, with its various sensuous objects, be not an effect of spiritual causes, but only of natural causes, if space and time be not the outbursts of thought, then it must be evident that any references to the spiritual world in proof of the signification of that which exists in the natural would be inconclusive and false. A gentle ox in the natural world is not the representative sign of a good affection, because an ox is the effect of such an affection when exhibited to the sentient faculties in the spiritual world. No such conclusion, it may well be thought, can be drawn unless the two worlds be constituted alike. But the intrinsic reason, as well as the reasonableness of correspondences, in reference both to the Holy Scripture and to the objects and events of nature, all of which are said to represent and signify, is explained upon this ground, that they are, and in the spiritual world are perceived to be, effects of interior causes existing in the wills and intellects of sentient beings. If then the two worlds be not constituted alike, there is no foundation for the doctrine of correspondence, nor for the spiritual explanations of the word, nor for the declaration that all nature is a theatre which represents the Lord's kingdom, or its opposite. But if they be created according to one law by him who is neither in space nor in time, but who is the infinite and eternal cause of both, then is the reality of correspondences clear to the heaven-directed reason, although to the natural mind, which is usually overshadowed by a cloud of fallacy, they may still appear different. And point number 116. After the explanation given by the author of the mode in which spiritual space and time are generated, and in which all the objects of their three kingdoms are produced in the sentient faculties of their minds, in correspondence with the affinities of love and thought, the only remaining point to which it may be right to direct the attention is the declaration which occurs in the extract from number 926 of Apocalypse Explained. It is there said that the objects which appear in heaven have a spiritual origin, but those which appear in our world are material origin. Now, if by a material origin the matter of the naturalist existing in space and enduring in time distinct from the human mind, be meant, and not existing in a space and enduring in a time created by the divine life in the sentient faculties, it is certain that great difficulty will arise in the endeavour to reconcile such an interpretation with other passages of a contrary import, which are abundantly interspersed throughout the theological writings of the author. For these passages and the explanation which shall reconcile the seemingly contradictions, the reader is referred to the chapters on the natural world.